So in my experience, sometimes if you look at things from the outside, you're like, I can't believe that that is going on. And when you look at it at a more granular level, or you get away from the sort of sticker shock or the surprise element of things, you actually look at it. Generally, things are pretty rational, pretty sane with how things are actually done, right? And you just have to often take a different perspective, right? So, I'm shaking right now is I get a lot of rejections all the time. And so one side is from it is, yeah, the stuff that I'm actually doing is pretty good and it does get, quote unquote unfairly rejected, right? And that's from my perspective. But if you look at it from another perspective as somebody that's on the other side, that they're having to make a decision between me and somebody else that have pretty identical ideas or identical papers. Um, and there are, elements that give the benefit of the doubt to another person in terms of a marketplace, you make that decision. Of course, they're going to make that decision in the way that they actually do, right? And it's completely rational. It's completely makes sense on the particular side of things. And I want you to sort of think about that with all areas of life. Once you sort of dive down and you really start thinking about things, there is a sticker shock element to a lot of things, right? Somebody is getting paid this amount, right? I often think about like, physicians, for example. It looks like when you look at their salary, you're like, oh my God, they're getting paid so much. It's outrageous. Until you start taking a deep dive and you factor in how many hours that they're actually working, the amount of schooling that they go into, and you start like breaking it down. And often, despite the fact that they're making a whole boatload of money on the surface, many of you would choose to go like, yeah, that's not for me because it looks like they're actually working a heck of a lot more than what they're actually getting paid to do compared to what other people do. You have to remember a lot of these people are highly effective, efficient people. And I don't like that term, right? I don't like either of those terms, but they are doing a lot and they do put in a great deal of time and effort. And on top of it, they did a whole bunch of schooling that was really boring and tedious and that nobody else wants to do. Right. And I want you to sort of think about that is that there is elements of things that on the surface you think, well, this thing is going on and it's surprising that that thing is going on. And it seems unfair and all of that kind of stuff, like the emotional reaction to things. When you start taking a deep dive, you kind of understand what is actually going on. And yeah, there are unfair elements. There are, real legitimate things that are going on, but you have to take that surface that you have to go from away from the surface, right? And really take a deep dive in terms of what's actually going on and make sense of it. Now, I often think that a lot of things, if you just look at it in a broader sense, many things in life, despite the fact that you often get sticker shock, um, in all elements of that sticker shock where you're like, that can't be. Once you start looking into it, it makes a lot more sense. Um, and you have to sort of think about if it's going on, why is it actually going on? Right? Our initial reaction often is like, well, there must be all this sort of nefarious, goofy things that are going on, and it's highly problematic. It's often not the case. It's often people making very quote unquote rational decisions that make a lot of sense, and they're trying to do their best. But for whatever reason, sometimes those things result in things that just you get sticker shock or you get an emotional reaction to, right? Like physician, part of the reason why they get paid so much, for example, is because that they are um, that there's just not that many people doing, right? And if there was more people, and it's just an easy thing to say, right? Just hire more people. Well, you have to find the people that actually have the competence in that area, which means that they have gone to school for many, many years and did all these sort of board exams and all this sort of nonsense, and try to find those people. And what you find out is that there's just not a lot of people that are willing to do that, even if you incentivize them, even if you really go through and take a deep dive and encourage people and push people through science and all that kind of stuff. There's just not a lot of people that are going to be willing to do it. And so if that's the case, then there are a lot of people, then we have to pay people that are actually competent in the marketplace pretty spectacularly well. And the reason why that happens is because there's few people that can do it, and they can go from place to place getting a slightly higher wage, and often a much higher wage, by doing this sort of going from place to place. I want you to really think about that in terms of how things are going on. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is sometimes there are undervalued resources, right? Or things that in the marketplace, somebody will be willing to, get paid a heck of a lot less than they should, or for whatever reason, they're willing to do that. And so it looks like in the marketplace, right? Like if you're looking at things at the surface, it looks like, well, this person is just as competent and they're only doing, only getting paid this, or, that there is a lack of, that it's far cheaper to do this, until you actually start investigating why that is the case. And once you start investigating why that is the case, you're like, oh, okay, that is an unusual circumstance in that particular scenario. So what I'm getting at is, at the surface, a lot of things seem shocking. A lot of things seem like unfair and all of that kind of stuff. And on the surface, there probably is some of that that's going on. But once you take a deeper dive and you understand what's actually going on, then it makes a lot more sense. And now, this is where it gets a little challenging, is that there is a lot of people doing very rational decisions, very, very rational decisions, and still collectively, that they end up, the sort of system as a whole ends up being weighted in a certain way, that there's very real, like things like biases, for example. And it's because everybody is doing things very rationally. It all makes a lot of sense, and yet there's something really weird that's going on. So I want you to really think about your choices and decisions, or making inferences based on surface level things, and really take a deep dive in terms of what's going on and make sense of the world a little bit more. I really take those deep dives, understand what is going on, question assumptions. When you get sticker shock, really, really think about what's actually going on. And if collectively, the system as a whole, right, like there is a bunch of people, for example, like, that get paid a certain amount or whatnot, surely that there's something that's going on that is representative of the system. Now, we know that can be weighted in a certain way. The outcomes can be weighted in a certain way, but the sort of system can have flaws and all that kind of stuff. And it's not really flaws, it's just the way that things actually are. And we can sort of correct for those and be more thoughtful of some of those things. But collectively, you have to really look at it and say, why is that actually going on? So, long story short, I'm trying to be a little cagey here, is really take a deep dive in terms of what's going on to make sense of things rather than just looking at the surface. And once you start doing that, you'll begin to appreciate things a little bit more. It's often a lot more richer than you think. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.